between two women. One used beauty, the other used power. One whispered her way into a man's weakness. The other forced her way into a nation's soul. Delilah, a woman who discovered the secret of strength and used it to destroy a man chosen by God. But Jezebel, she did something far more dangerous. She didn't just destroy a man. She rewrote an entire kingdom. So the question is not just who was evil. The question is, who was more dangerous? Because danger is not always obvious. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it speaks softly. Sometimes it looks like authority, like influence, like power. And before you realize it, everything has changed. Jezebel was not just a queen. She was a force. She came from Sidon, a place where darkness was not hidden. It was celebrated at a land filled with idols, where false gods like Baal were worshipped with fire, with sacrifice, with complete devotion. The air was filled with smoke from burning altars. Voices echoed in desperate prayers to lifeless gods, and rituals were performed, not out of truth, but out of fear and control. This was the world she knew. This was her foundation. She was the daughter of a king, raised in royalty, but also raised in rebellion against the true God. She learned early that power is not given. It is taken. That influence is not requested. It is enforced. That truth can be replaced if you are strong enough to control the narrative. She did not grow into power. She was shaped by it. And when she entered Israel, she did not come to learn. She came to dominate. When she married King Ahab, it looked like a union. But it was an invasion, because Jezebel never follows. She leads. She did not adopt Israel's ways. She replaced them, slowly, strategically, carefully. She introduced Baal worship. At first, it seemed small, just another altar, just another practice. But compromise never stays small. Altars began to rise across the land. Sacred places were defiled. The presence of God was pushed aside, and the people began to forget. Forget who they were, forget what they stood for, forget the God who chose them. And when truth is forgotten, anything can replace it. Then came fear. The prophets of God were no longer honored. They were hunted, tracked down, forced into hiding, and many were killed. Their voices silenced, not because they were wrong, but because they spoke truth. And truth is always dangerous to control. And Ahab, the king, sat on the throne, but he was not in control, because where Jezebel ruled, authority becomes empty. Fear replaces faith, control replaces righteousness, and power replaces God. But darkness can only reign for so long, because God always raises a voice, and that voice was Elijah. A man with no army, no throne, no political influence, but he carried something greater, authority from heaven. He stood before Ahab and spoke a sentence, simple but devastating. There will be no rain. And at that moment, everything changed. The skies closed, no clouds formed, no rain fell, the ground hardened, the rivers dried, the crops failed. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, months into years. Hunger spread. Weakness grew. The land suffered. And yet, Jezebel did not bow, did not surrender. I did not change, because pride would rather endure destruction than admit it was wrong. Then came the moment that would expose everything. On Mount Carmel, a confrontation was set. Hundreds of prophets of Baal against one man, Elijah. The challenge was clear. Call on your God, and the one who answers by fire is the true God. The prophets of Baal went first. They cried out loudly. They shouted with intensity. They danced around the altar. Hours passed. Still nothing. Their desperation grew. They cut themselves. They screamed louder. But there was no response. Because false power has no substance, no authority, no life, only illusion. Then Elijah stepped forward. He rebuilt the altar of God. Stone by stone. He placed the sacrifice. Then did something shocking. He poured water over it, again and again, until everything was soaked. No human explanation, no possible trick. Then he prayed, not loudly, not dramatically, just simply. And suddenly, fire fell from heaven. Powerful, instant, undeniable. It consumed everything, the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, even the water. In that moment, truth stood undeniable. The people fell to the ground and cried out, "The Lord, He is God." But even after that, even after seeing fire from heaven, Jezebel did not change. No fear, no repentance, only anger, only defiance. She sent a message to Elijah. By tomorrow, you will be dead. This is what hardened pride looks like. It sees truth and still rejects it. Then came another story, quiet but deadly. A vineyard owned by a man named Naboth, a simple man, a righteous man, who honored what God had given him. King Ahab wanted the vineyard, but Naboth refused. He would not give away his inheritance. Ahab became angry, restless, frustrated, but Jezebel stepped in. Because where weakness exists, control takes over. She wrote letters in the king's name. She arranged a false accusation. She set up false witnesses, and Naboth was declared guilty. Not because he was guilty, but because power demanded it, and he was killed. An innocent man, destroyed, for possession, for control, for power. But God sees, always, and justice always comes. Elijah returned, not with warning, but with judgment, because there is a point where mercy ends and justice begins. The word was spoken. In the place where blood was shed, blood would be required, and Jezebel would fall. Time passed, but judgment never forgets. The day came. A new king rose, power shifted, and Jezebel knew. Her time had ended. But even then, she refused to humble herself. She painted her face. She fixed her appearance. She stood at the window, still seeing herself as a queen, still holding on to pride, still rejecting truth. But heaven had already decided. She was thrown down. Her body struck the ground, and everything spoken was fulfilled. Jezebel fell, not in honor, not in victory, but in judgment. Her story ended, but her lesson did not. Because Jezebel is not just a person, it is a spirit of control, manipulation, domination, a spirit that silences truth, a spirit that destroys righteousness, a spirit that exalts itself above God, and that spirit still exists today. It works quietly, through influence, through pressure, through control. But hear this clearly. No matter how powerful it looks, no matter how long it lasts, no power, no throne, no rebellion can stand against God forever. Judgment may be delayed, but it is never denied. So now the question is not Jezebel or Delilah. The question is you. What are you building your life on? Truth or control? Because in the end, only one will stand. Choose wisely. God is not mocked.